And we are live again. Welcome back, everyone, to the Solvable Mysteries Podcast. My name is Juras. I am your host of the Solvable Mysteries Podcast. I'm joined by my co-host, Glenn Highcove, who's joining me all the way from California. How are you feeling, man?
Hi, I'm doing okay. It's the weather's changing. The sky has been smoky for 2 weeks with the California fires. So every time I go outside, there's like ash falling from the sky, and the sky looks weird. But other than that, yeah, just life moves on, and I'm happy to be around, happy to be on the show tonight.
Excellent, man. So, okay, man, we have a pretty crazy case today. I think this is definitely one of the crazier ones I have looked into. What do you think about it?
I think it's pretty interesting, and I think we have a kind of an interesting thought here. So, one of the themes of our show, even though we're called Solvable Mysteries, we originally started the show as a focus on true crime. So a lot of what we talk about has to do with, something that happened to somebody, or we'll focus on an actual murderer because of the crimes that happen. And, a lot of cases, you think of some of the most famous serial killers or criminals like John Wayne Gacy or Ted Bundy or Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. It's interesting because I think a lot of times you look at these people and what they did and their horrible crimes, and then you look really closely into their childhood and the way they were raised. And there's like a consistent pattern of usually neglect and abuse, and often it's pretty horrifying. Sometimes you actually end up feeling kind of sorry for these people because, some pretty bad stuff happened. But I have kind of an interesting thought about tonight's case, is that what if you had parents that weren't neglectful and weren't necessarily abusive, but their parenting was so aggressive and so controlling, and I'm talking specifically about a kind of parenting called tiger parenting, which we'll get into a better explanation of in a bit. But what if your parents cared so much and so tried to make you a success and control your life? Could a case be made that kind of parenting could actually be as bad in some ways and have the same kind of effect for, the right or wrong kind of person, that it would actually make you do something that was in some ways comparable to, something that like Ted Bundy or, John Wayne Gacy would do? Could your parents caring too much actually backfire and turn you into a horrible person, or at least make you do a horrible thing?
Right. Before we get into the case, guys, the first thing I want to play for everyone is a 911 call that took place on 2010, November 8th. Playing it right now.
Where are you, ma'am? Please just ma'am, calm down. What? Some people broke into our house and took the show's all his money. Okay, ma'am, where are you? What? Avenue Road.
Yes.
Can you spell the street name for me, please?
Dad?
Ma'am. Hello? Hello?
Yes.
Ma'am, I need to know your address. Avenue Road, can you please spell?
In Helen Avenue, my dad just went outside screaming.
Ma'am, can you spell the street address for me, please?
H-E-L-E-N. Someone broke in and I heard shots like pops. I don't know what's happening. I'm tied upstairs.
So that's the 911 call that Jennifer Pan made on 2010, November 8th, when apparently, initially, allegedly, according to her, 3 men entered her home where she was at that point with her father as well as her mother, and they pretty much did a home invasion where at the end of the day the parents ended up getting shot. The mother ended up dying. Well, what happened to the father we will get into shortly. And basically Jennifer was apparently tied up upstairs, and she was spared for some reason. Well, we will get into those reasons. And the invaders just ran out of the house. So I know, man. That's the initial story right here, and it sounds suspicious immediately to me, and I think it should sound suspicious to our audience as well. How are the people that are home invading a house just leave one witness alive upstairs? I mean, we will get into this detail shortly. So, I mean, your take on this case, man?
Yeah, I mean, I almost, because this is something that happened, one of the most famous cases that was similar to this, for reasons we'll talk about, are the Menendez brothers. That case, because that happened in Los Angeles, and that had kind of a really similar start with like a 911 call and stuff that happened to parents and things with the kids and a whole crazy trial. So like, I think that's almost like the OJ trial of, things happening to parents with, with kids and the whole plot and the whole thing. So yeah, that's my thought. I think again, in the call, I know one of the versions of the call I heard, you could actually hear the dad like stumbling around and like moaning, and I guess he made his way out of the house with the injuries we're going to talk about later, which is pretty, sad and creepy to think about.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So, I guess without stepping into the details right now, I think the first thing we should do is look into the past of Jennifer Pan.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you want to bring her?
Yeah. I feel like I feel a little closer to this topic, strangely enough, because living where I do here in Los Angeles and in North America, I've had a lot of exposure, I guess, to families like this, and I am somewhat actually familiar with the tiger parenting, though I wasn't I wasn't necessarily subject to it myself, but I've been subject to some of the byproducts, and some of the circumstances of it, or the things that happen to people because of it. So first we'll just get into Jennifer's parents. So Jennifer Pan is a Asian Canadian woman. Her parents, I think we should talk about first because they're really the central characters of the story. Her parents were both immigrants. They were essentially refugees from Vietnam who went to Canada. Her father, Huei Hann Pan, was born and educated in Vietnam and moved to Canada in 1979 as a political refugee. Her mother, Bich, was also immigrated as a refugee. It says here that they were actually Sino-Vietnamese, Soviet Hoa, which actually I think are Chinese Vietnamese. So China is a country that obviously has had a lot of ethnic migration through it over the years, and there's been kind of this is a kind of a side topic, but Vietnam has kind of a love-hate relationship with China, and it has actually a significant amount of people from China that immigrated like hundreds of years ago to Vietnam back when China was controlling it, and actually during the war and after the war, these people were discriminated against. So as a result, both Canada and the United States offered refugee status to people from Vietnam that were fleeing the communists when they took over at the end of the war. Because of that, it became much easier to immigrate. But as a result, you can imagine someone that's coming as a refugee, they're probably a pretty hardcore person, right? And I mean that like in a very positive sense. They are refugees that kind of like they don't have a home to go to. They've already been through a lot. I mean, I know people that I've known that have been refugees from other countries have like run into like piracy when they were on the boats on the way over here. It's a pretty rough road. It's not like, some of the immigration routes that some of us had where it was a little bit easier. It's never easy for any immigrant, but they had especially a rough time. So I think it's really, we're celebrating that both of her parents, they came here and they found work at a auto parts manufacturer, and they both did skilled labor for this company that did car parts, and they did what kind of, there's almost a stereotype for a lot of immigrants from that part of the world, is they were very, very good about not spending their money in ways that didn't make sense. They were very good about saving their money. They were very good about being smart in how they invested their money and their savings. And I think because of that, they had very high standards for, how their children would conduct themselves afterwards. Now, I think it's also worth mentioning that if you can imagine you've come from another country where maybe before the war, your family had it pretty well, and you had a bright future, and that future was taken away from you, and then you go to a country like Canada, or the United States. You're in North America, one of the most desirable destinations for immigrants around the world. Well, you kind of don't want your children to waste that opportunity. So
Right.
I mentioned this because what I saw, I've had, so in high school, I had a girlfriend whose parents and she herself were Vietnamese refugees. I had my best friend in high school, also, his parents were Vietnamese refugees. In fact, his dad was in the special forces in Vietnam. So, in both cases, I got a pretty good look, and I have to say the parenting's super strict. So parenting was even stricter, I think, than I was running into even other Asian families who were not, who were not fleeing like a war zone. So obviously, I was in the magnet program, so I had friends whose parents were, from Taiwan and Hong Kong and South Korea, and obviously all of these places have had their share of strife and things too. But I always felt I used to literally complain about it to both my girlfriend and to my best friend, that I always thought that their parents were too strict. And just like I said, as part of this introduction, to talk about the tiger parenting, because that's going to be very specific here.
Yep.
There's a little bit of a tiger parenting has an association with Asian families. Dr. Grande mentions this, but of course it's not just Asian families. There's plenty of families where the parents have like a super strict, controlling attitude about their children and what their children spend their time on, and have a very rigorous standard for grades. And what I mean by that is there's a stereotype with some kinds of parents, and I won't just point the finger at any one ethnic group, but it is actually true that there's some parents from some schools in some areas and some cultures where, because of all the reasons I listed, because it's like you made it to the United States, you won the lottery already. Now I want you to try really hard and win the lottery again, and let's be a doctor or a lawyer, let's be a top of the top in the United States. Because of that, literally there's a super high standard that they have with their kids, where if you don't get an A or an A plus, if you get a 98, I knew kids who would probably oh no absolutely serious, dead serious about this. I knew kids, especially in the magnet program, where if they went home and they got a 95%,
whoa,
they were maybe, I hate to say this, they were maybe going to get a little bit of a beating. My family knew families.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah. I mean, and so you can imagine the kids that were able to live up to those standards, the fires at their back, right? We knew. I don't even want to reveal here some of the abuse I heard about in those kind of families, but you can imagine for the kids it's a lot of pressure. And then you can imagine me, for me it's a lot to compete with. But yeah, I mean, those kids were not always so happy. So I know in the magnet program, I personally experienced some bullying from some of these kids, and now 20, 30 years later, I'm well, yeah, because they were going home and they were getting bullied by their mom and dad, so they would show up to school and get pissed off and just look for someone to take it out on. So yeah. Okay, that's a long but I think necessary lead into this, because our main character, our main focus in this episode, Jennifer Pan, who was born in 1986. She had a brother who was born 3 years later in 1989. Jennifer Pan was very much subject to this kind of parenting. Her parents had, the same kind of laser focus. She was growing up in Ontario, in Canada. She had these parents who, by all means were winners. They had a luxury car. I think they had a Lexus. Man. Yeah, 2 cars, a Lexus and a Mercedes. I mean, I don't have a Lexus or a Mercedes, so that's definitely winning. They had in between 1990s and 2000s, they had about $200,000 in savings, which is very impressive.
In back in the day money, let's remember that back in the day money, that's like $500,000 in savings at this point.
Yeah, and we don't even know that could be on top of retirement accounts and things like that too. So that could be, you know what I mean, that might just be liquidity.
Right. That's
on
crazy.
top of the house, on top of the cars. That could be like you know, FU money. So yeah, that's pretty impressive. And so the thing is though, her parents, you know, they were doing one job, and it almost seems hypocritical because it's like, well, you know, mom and dad, you aren't a doctor, but they don't want to hear that. So they had a couple different tracks. They had a couple different plans for her, and they were definitely having her multitask. So she was taking piano lessons from the age of 4. I definitely knew kids that were doing that. I would imagine, it's not mentioned here, but I imagine she also was having to do Vietnamese language school.
Right.
Because I know a lot of kids, you know, they have to on the weekends, they have to go to school for like the language that their parents speak.
That's a great childhood, man. That's an amazing childhood.
Yeah. It's like a childhood where like you're basically studying to go to Harvard, like from when you're a little kid. So she also wanted to become Olympic figure skating champion. That makes sense because this was during the era, I mean, still is, but especially back then, 1980s, 90s, 2000s was the era of like the North American, Asian American, you know, Olympic skating champions. So like Nancy Kwan, was it Nancy Kwan? Anyways, yeah, we had a couple folks that were here in North America that were big champions. So that was certainly one of her goals. So she actually was pretty good, but then she tore a ligament in her knee, and it was like a career-ending injury. So she couldn't, you know, continue with that. But of course, they had diversified their options with her. She was going to a Catholic secondary school, which I'll mention. Catholics, there were actually a significant number of Catholic Vietnamese, and that was also part of who was discriminated against under the communist regime. Mm-hmm. So certainly, like I know my girlfriend from high school, she was Catholic Vietnamese. Yeah. So she played the flute. So she plays piano. She plays the flute in the school band. It says her parents, her friends said her parents were kind of like the classic Tiger parents. That her dad was really the one pushing hard, and the mom was sort of, you know, just on with the program. And here's the thing that is very familiar, is that the parents were extremely controlling over time. So, you know, everything was like about school and going home and studying and doing your homework, which I saw once again with my friend. Like, my friend came over to my house one time. This was my best friend in high school. Basically, came over to my house one time. Jeez. And complained the whole time that we needed to keep working on stuff, or his parents were going to get mad at him. And it was like, wow, yeah, and certainly it probably goes without saying, but parents often also have high expectations that the child is going to, let's say, keep their relationships, you know, romantic and otherwise, within the culture. So there probably was some expectation on her, I'm just guessing, that she was going to at some point marry another Chinese Vietnamese person, ethnic person, like another refugee, or another child of a refugee, I should say. There, it doesn't say that, but I'm going to build that assumption in. I think that's a pretty safe assumption.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I agree.
So yeah, I mean, it says here she was never permitted to date boys. Yeah, for sure. While attending high school, or to go to dances, high school dances or proms. You know, really was just like all about the school. So it was this pressure room of this boiler room of like, just, you know, just work on this. Couldn't go to any parties. So at the age of 22, she had never gone to a club, been drunk, visited a friend's cottage, or gone on vacation without her family.
I was thinking, the friend's cottage, that's pretty random. You know, I've never visited a friend's cottage either. I'm 24.
I mean, but a friend's house, though, right? I hope that's what they meant. Maybe it's weird Canadian dialect here. Yeah, I think that. I mean, meanwhile, I will say though, for all my like prattling about that, meanwhile, I did have, from that same magnet program, I had a friend whose parents were from Hong Kong and Taiwan, and his parents were like the opposite it was really weird because they like now he and his sister are both like artists, and like he didn't finish college, so like his parents actually did the opposite of that. They even got divorced, I think, when the kids were young, so they kind of like didn't they kind of broke with the program all the way. But I remember I used to go to this kid's house. They used to have me sleeping over there like 3 or 4 nights in a row during the summer. So, there's definitely people that break with that plan. There's definitely people that like find their own way here in America. But I'm just saying it's not so unusual,
Yeah.
and it's very understandable that someone comes here, they're already kind of set in their ways culturally, and they have a set of expectations. And like, yeah, I mean, if I were them and I had just fled a war zone, and all of a sudden I'm in like the land of like North American riches, and you have all these great school programs and all these great universities, like you want your kid to do better than you're doing. I guess here's the question is, were their expectations realistic for her actual challenges? And I think this is where you start to see the cracks in the foundation, where it does not seem like she was some kind of super genius. She tried really hard, but as we'll get into the next section here, my opinion is, maybe I'll harp on this later, these pressures caused her to start lying and being deceptive. So, is it super reasonable to think that somebody's going to be this perfect student? I don't know if you want to take it from here about, what Jennifer's life of deception was, to try to have some kind of normal life after that.
I think we could jump into her first set of lies. Well, like the lies, I'm thinking for the parents being so diligent with their money, they really missed like a whole bunch of red flags, I feel like, I'm just thinking that myself, I would probably have noticed the BS in her like made up stories before they did, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm thinking maybe they were really busy and maybe Jennifer was just such a great liar. But actually, we have some videos to play today regarding her interviews. She did like 3 interviews with investigators that we're gonna play for you guys, that I have like made like yesterday, and I've picked out like the best parts just to like sort of give you guys the feel of how she was acting and things like that. I don't think she's like the best liar in the world. I don't think she has like the best thinking in terms of like manipulation and things like that. I think there's a whole bunch of holes in her like story of how, the home invasion went down. So I'm thinking, how are the parents being fooled like that ever since she was in high school? Because apparently her grades were pretty good, like top-notch grades during her like early school years, and I can definitely relate to that. Like, my grades were pretty good back then, but they just plummeted to like all-time lows when I entered high school. But my parents obviously didn't care about that, so I'm grateful for that. But her parents would have cared about that a lot. So she was still getting like pretty average grades, like in the 70 range. I know personally, if I would like consistently get like 70% on my tests, I would be bragging to my parents. I would be asking for like I would be asking for rewards. If I'm getting like 70, you're gonna buy me stuff right now. So but apparently in her house, that was definitely not acceptable. So
no, the 70s is like you are a super failure under the Tiger parent grading scheme.
So she actually was forging report cards. Now I'm thinking, how are you forging report cards? Back in the day, I knew about people who tried to forge report cards, but here in Lithuania, I don't think there was a possibility to do that, because you had to like have like a like the teacher would have to like sign every like week's thing, so you would have to like fake the signature every week, and we had like these special like books, like some old school Soviet Union stuff. So I think it's harder to forge that.
What?
Yeah.
I'll just interject real quick. I think what it is because I've seen this before, and I've kind of run into it with these specific families, is the child will take advantage of the parents not being super fluent with either the native language and/or the practices.
Oh,
So
yeah.
they'll sort of, you know what I mean? They'll sort of gaslight the parent a little bit, like, oh, it's just like the parents, they don't know what they don't know, right? So they don't, because they're not really, their kids kind of sometimes like the only communication. Often the parents maybe aren't as comfortable like actually going to go talk to the teacher or the school. So they kind
Oh,
of,
yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they're also really naive about, about how clever their kid could be, or things like that. So I think that's probably it, is that the kid actually takes advantage of being like the one who's most fluent in, English in this case,
Right.
and yeah, uses that as leverage.
Okay, yeah, I didn't even think about that. That makes sense because apparently the parents really had like they weren't like super fluent in English. Anyways, man, so her parents were sort of under this ruse that Jennifer was actually getting straight A's and that Jennifer actually won like scholarships to enter universities and things like that. Now, I think that Jennifer would have made university regardless of her like 70% range grades, maybe not with scholarships and things like that, but she actually never finished high school. She failed a calculus class in her senior year, so her like appliance to, I'm reading here, Ryerson University pretty much fell apart. Like they didn't admit her, but she lied. She definitely told her parents that she got like scholarships and that the parents don't even have to worry about the money because she's not gonna pay anything because she's under like scholarship programs and things like that. However, instead of going to the university the Ryerson University that she sort of told her parents that she's gonna be attending, she actually sat in cafes, taught as a piano instructor, as well as worked in a restaurant to earn money. Okay, so the parents are like they're a little bit crazy. I have to say that because if I ever have a daughter and after school she already like has 2 jobs, I'm thinking like I'm proud of you, you know what I'm saying? But like the parents, I mean that wouldn't cut it. Especially like a piano teacher, that's a good job. That's not even a bad job. Okay.
I mean, she's not lazy, right? That's the crazy part, is it's like she's trying to make up for.
She just doesn't want to do academic stuff. What's the point?
Right.
What's, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what she tells her parents, and they believe her for a while. Also, the general consensus was that she was gonna attend this Ryerson University for 2 years, and then after the 2 years, she would get accepted into the University of Toronto to finish up her pharmacy-like program and things like that. Because in the first place, like her father, Hann, actually wanted her to become a doctor, like a surgeon or something like that. But obviously not everyone has the stomach for that. So they later they came to a realization that, Jennifer couldn't do that type of work. And she sort of was focused to go into a pharmacology program in the University of Toronto. So this is the second part of the plan. Now, before we jump into what happens after that, we should mention that she did have a boyfriend at the time, a very long time boyfriend. I have his picture somewhere around here. So basically this guy, this is a dude. His name was, I'm trying to read it here, I don't know, misspelled. I'm just gonna say Daniel Wong, because Daniel Wong, he had like, I think he wasn't of the same descent. I think she was of Chinese and Filipino descent, so the parents actually did not approve of him, because apparently being like having like a Chinese and Filipino descent, that already doesn't work for these parents that fled from Vietnam, even though they also have like some Chinese background. I don't really know how that works. Let's probably not get into that too much. Now, this guy right here, he's definitely a bit of an oddball, but I guess we will get into it a little bit later. So, as I've said, Jennifer was, allegedly going to enter into the University of Toronto. Now, what actually ended up happening, she sort of somehow got her parents to agree to a sort of situation where she would be living with her friend who lived next to the University of Toronto during the weekdays, just so she could have like just so that it would be like less time to travel to the university. Now the parents actually agreed without like double checking that story. Maybe they did, maybe it was some sort of a really smart ploy that she did, but I'm not really certain about that part of the story. Now what we have here is that she actually was not staying with this friend, she was staying with Daniel Wong. Now Daniel Wong actually worked at Boston Pizza restaurant, and he was also a weed dealer. But what I've gathered, he was like a small time weed dealer, because if you're like a big timer, you're not actually working at a pizzeria, you know. So I think it was just something that he did on the side in Toronto. So basically that's what's happening. Her parents at that point are thinking that Jennifer is actually attending, you know, she's attending University of Toronto, which she hadn't even finished high school at that point. So while pretending to complete her degree at the University of Toronto, Pan actually told her parents that she had started working as a volunteer at a hospital for sick children. And I'm thinking, this is like, you're pushing it way too much. Like, I think at that point she should have like just kept like the plot going, besides like even making her seem like she was even better than what even her parents expected, because like volunteering at like sick children's hospital, that's pretty crazy. However, the parents became suspicious because they realized she did not have a hospital ID badge or a hospital uniform. So on one occasion, Bich, the mother, actually followed her daughter to work and quickly discovered her deception. So basically, I think she fled, she like ran into the hospital and things like that, but then they found out that she wasn't actually working there, something like that. And actually, the father wanted to throw Jennifer out of the house, because at that point I believe she was still living in the house for the weekends at least. Her mother actually persuaded the father for her to stay, but she had to like completely turn her life around. So she was banned from seeing Daniel Wong, which she still did whenever she had the chance. She also had to like go back to school, and then after that she should immediately go to a university. So yeah, as you've said, like she was 24 at the time, and you know, she was pretty much really restricted by her parents, and she had to like live at her home, and only like, you know, like the only job she could have is that piano teaching job and things like that. So I'm thinking that's like super restrictive for a 24-year-old. Like, you're 24, you're like old enough to have kids at this point. So, you know, I don't really know what's happening there. Now, I'm thinking, before we step into the actual murder of the parents, well, at least of the mother, I think we should jump into the first attempt when Jennifer Pan actually wanted to order a hit on her father, like in 2010. Are you aware of what I'm talking about, with like the Ricardo Duncan dude?
Yeah, so apparently, I mean, this is part of, I think, where you got to look at the mindset of this person and how sane they are and how maybe naive they are. I mean, it's worth pointing out two things before we at this stage is, one, look at the consequences she faced for letting down her parents at this point. So at this point, her dad's he's ready to throw her out of the house and cut her off financially, yet from a lot of ways you could say they haven't actually given her the skills to be an adult. So they've kind of like infantilized her and said, you know, hey, no, we know better. We know better for you. You do this, this, and this, or else. But now that she's let them down, they're like, oh, well, you know, the hell with you. You know, we'll just throw you out. And so, like, it kind of makes you feel like someone's got the fire at their back, but they don't even have, you know, other than, of course, working these little jobs and whatever they can kind of socially set up. Yeah, it's worth pointing out, like, maybe this explains some of the clumsy ways she went about this. But yeah, it looks like she essentially tried to network. There was a friend from high school who I guess had supposedly bragged about stabbing people when he was in high school.
These are some good friends, yeah.
yeah, that's a classy guy. And by the way, but at the end, I want to put in some notes about why I think maybe her situation was a little more constrained in some ways, and why maybe she was so relatively desperate to hold on to this boyfriend. But yeah, so she's like, oh, so the guy that brags about stabbing people, he might know somebody that could kill my
father,
my family. Yeah, my father. Yeah, because he was the one that was kind of the bad guy here. Yeah. So supposedly there's kind of some dispute about this, but supposedly she offered him, $1,500, or even potentially gave him $1,500. And then I'm trying to remember, was it that he also had a second person that he networked with?
Nah, I don't think this was pretty much the case, where the dude Andrew Montemayor, basically the guy who bragged about stabbing people in high school, he had a friend called Ricardo Duncan, and pretty much Pan gave Ricardo 1.5 G's, so as you've said, $1,500 to kill her father in the parking lot at his workplace. Like, that's pretty crazy. There's like surveillance everywhere. Like, why would you do that? But Duncan, the guy who got the money, he actually said that Pan only gave him $200, and then he actually gave her the $200 back, as well as he said that he wouldn't kill like her parents, or at least the father. So I'm thinking he probably there's a good possibility that he just took the money and then he said, "What money?"
Yeah, either that or he had a sudden flash of intelligence and was like, "Oh wait, this will mess up my life in a serious way, and this person doesn't know what she's talking about."
If someone gives me the money, I'm just like keeping the money, and then I'm like, "What money?" Because it's not like just listen, man. This Jennifer Pan, like, what is she gonna do? Like, what I'm saying? Like, I would just take the money.
I guess, well, you know what? But I guess maybe that's the thing, is that someone who's that crazy, they go and they keep on giving people money till finally somebody does it. So maybe if you do that, maybe you end up on the list with dad and mom. I don't know.
Goddamn, yeah. Better watch your back. Yeah. Okay, man. Yeah. So let's jump into the actual like hitman arrangement, which was also super crazy. Like, remember the guy, Daniel? So a quick backstory. One thing I want to mention here is that Daniel Wong actually stopped dating at some point, like Jennifer, because Daniel Wong was a little bit like you. He was like, obviously not a lot like you, but in a sense that he was thinking that the parents were too restrictive and this is way too much of a hassle for me to keep dating Jennifer. So he actually got another girlfriend. And actually Jennifer came up with a plan with a story where allegedly some police officer came to her house, then 3 people rushed the house. They pretty much like allegedly raped her, and then the next day she got a mail from the girlfriend, the then girlfriend of Daniel Wong, and in the mail, in the letter, there was only a bullet. So I'm thinking at this point Daniel Wong should have been, Jennifer's crazy, like I need to stay away from her, but like his reaction was actually, I need to get back with Jennifer. So that was definitely a crazy situation right there. After a while, they actually come up with a plan to pay professional hitmans $10,000. Now, I'm definitely not certain how professional these guys were, you know what I'm saying? Because we're gonna get into the details, but like, so basically Daniel Wong, who was dealing marijuana at like, at like Toronto area and things like that, he actually knew some dudes who could like kill people for like $10,000, which is, it's pretty crazy, you know what I'm saying? I'm thinking, how did she even get the 10,000? So the initial plan was Daniel Wong as well as Jennifer Pan, they wanted to pay $10,000 to someone to kill the parents so that Jennifer could actually start living on her own, as well as they would inherit $500,000. I'm not really certain how much they would actually inherit, because remember, there's Felix Pan, the brother of Jennifer Pan, who would probably get like a 50% cut of that. So I'm thinking, like, is the family really worth $1 million? Maybe they're worth $1 million, but I don't know, man. So
Maybe she was counting on like life insurance kicking in, because a lot of times, a lot of times your job will insure you for maybe $250,000 or $300,000, and then you get that might be. But yeah, maybe I was doing the math too, so I was like, okay, whatever they had in cash, plus maybe retirement accounts, plus the house. Maybe they're just figuring they're gonna sell the house, and then insurance, maybe that. But yeah, that's a good point. It's like it makes you wonder, was she even thinking of the brother, or was she just kind of like Dr. Grande was saying, just kind of me?
Yeah. Okay, so pretty much the boyfriend, Daniel Wong, actually introduced her to a guy called Lenford Roy Crawford, whose nickname was Homeboy. At least that's what everyone is saying. I think they just called him Homeboy. I don't know. Who then gave Jennifer a SIM card and an iPhone as a burner phone. I'm thinking, an iPhone as a burner phone? These people in Canada, they're not making sound financial decisions, like you're not buying an iPhone as a burner phone. Regardless, this guy, Homeboy, actually contacted a dude called Eric Sean, nicknamed Sniper Carty. Well, I'm not sure who did the shooting, but if this guy is the sniper, then I'm probably not. He's definitely not a top pick on my squad if he's like the guy who is in charge of like the accuracy and things like that. Now, this dude turned to another man, David Milvaganam. I actually said his name correct. So David Milvaganam right here. So basically, these are the three people. Now, I'm really not certain how like the $10,000 were split, or like were they going to split it, like what the whole situation was, and even why everyone agreed to do the killing here, because this is way too crazy. 3 people coming in. Regardless, the murder took place at the Pan house. I have a Google Earth here of the Pan residence. Now we could see it's this house right here, and it's pretty much like a really nice suburban neighborhood actually of I guess the Toronto area. Now, the murder took place at their house on November 8th on 2010, so at the same day where you actually heard like the 911 call at the beginning of the show. Jennifer Pan actually unlocked the front door of the family home when she went to bed, then spoke to Milvaganam on the phone. Before that, she actually flashed, like there was a study, I think the second floor study of the house, and she actually flashed the light twice, and that was pretty much the sign for the intruders to go inside the house. So shortly after all of this goes down, Milvaganam and 2 other people entered the home through the unlocked front door, all carrying guns. In the court testimony, the Crown did not establish the identity of the other 2 hitmen, so because Daniel Wong and Crawford were at work. So this is pretty crazy. Was a Homeboy involved or not? I'm still at this point not 100% certain how that all went down. Regardless, Eric Carty, so the other guy from like the trio of the killers, he actually stated that he was only the driver for those who broke into the house, and that he selected them and was involved in plotting the attack. He also did not state that he was one of the 3 or that he directly attacked others, but pretty much the prosecution believes that he was definitely inside of the house. Also, it's still not known who actually did the shooting. Regardless of that, I think after a while they tie up Jennifer Pan to the second floor, somewhere around there. They take the parents to the basement. They put like a rag on their heads and they shoot them. I believe the mother was shot 3 times. I believe some of the shots were in her neck and some in her head, and the father was actually shot twice in his shoulder and in his head. And actually, from that 911 call that we just listened at the beginning of the show, you can sort of see and hear, like pretty much hear the father moan. So the father actually ends up surviving. Now, he was never the same after this, obviously, but he actually ended up surviving the attack. And also, we have Jennifer Pan calling the 911 call when she's tied up at the second floor. So I'm thinking this is a huge hole in this plot. Now, before we jump into everything, I'm thinking we should definitely play the clips right now. So the first interrogation, because I want our audience to actually listen in, and for the people that are on our YouTube channel, Solvable Mysteries Podcast on YouTube, you could pretty much see the videos I have prepared for you guys yesterday. And the first video is of Jennifer Pan's police interrogation on November 9th. So pretty much on the same day, but like a few hours after the murder. So let's listen into this interrogation video while it loads up.
So we're through the forms. That's the administrative process about this. Now I want you to sort of take yourself back to earlier on today, yesterday, meaning the 8th of November, and tell me about your day. Okay, start at any point in time, wherever you feel comfortable, and then we're gonna move forward. Okay.
Yesterday, probably around 9 o'clock in the morning, 9:30. My mother, she woke me up and she told me that she was going to visit my grandfather, who was ill, and that she was going to go over pick up my aunt to go. Once we stepped out of the house, there were a few police officers barricading the driveway. I was downstairs with my friend watching movies, and my mom was out dancing. My friend left around 9, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then I upstairs in my room, called it a night with the TV on, talking on the phone with a friend of mine. And then shortly after, my mom came home. I believe that was around 9:30 or so. She was rummaging downstairs. I didn't think anything of it. And then suddenly I just heard my mom calling for my dad to come down. And that's when I lowered the volume on my TV, and I could hear the voices weren't any voices I was very familiar with. And so I was scared and I couldn't move. I just sat in my room for a while. And then I thought I heard them all leave the top floor, and I peered out of my bedroom door. And a guy was there, and he came at me and had string in his hands and tied my arms back and said, "I have a gun behind your back. Do what I say. If you do what I say, then no one will get hurt. Where is the money? Show me where your money is." I have still a bit of money put aside from when I was waitressing, cash. So I showed him where it was, and he took it and put it in his pocket, I think. And then that's where they pushed me to my parents' room and asked me where the money was there, and I didn't really know. So they kind of one was right beside me, blocking my way to the door, while the other ones turned over the bed to find some more cash in my mom's bedside table. In which then they dragged me down the stairs and made me kneel at the bottom, telling me to face down on the floor while the other guy had a gun behind my head, and asked my mom where her purse was. My mom kept trying to get up, and they kept telling her, "Sit down." And so I didn't want her to get hurt, so I told her, "Mom, sit down." They were trying to find her wallet, but her English isn't good, so she kept saying purse. They kept pushing her down onto the chair.
Okay. Take your time. Take your time. All this is very important, so take your time.
They kept all the lights off on the main floor. The only time there was light was when they opened the fridge door to see if they could find where my mom's purse was. At that point, I saw 3 figures of men. One with a hoodie, like the one I could see the most clearly, he had a hoodie on, and I believe he had a bandana of some sort covering from like his lower, under his eyes down. And then, for some reason, I think one of the gentlemen asked my father if he had money in his wallet and where his wallet was. So they took me, because I was next to the stairwell, they took me up the stairs to show them where my father's wallet was. But I didn't know. They had turned the room upside down. I didn't know where his pants were at that time. And then, after they had gotten that, they had taken me and they tied me to the top of the banister. Just with one string, I could still move. But I was afraid to, because the one guy just had that gun. Just... Next thing I know, I think I heard my parents going down the stairs. And my mom was asking them for me to come with them. They wouldn't let me come with them. After they said, the last things I heard them say was, you lied to us, you lied to us. And then I heard 2 pops. My mom screamed. I yelled out for her. And a couple more pops.
Take your time. Take your time.
And I think I heard my mom say or moan or something, and then they did one more before they left, and then one of the guys said, we have to go now, it's been too long. And then they ran out the door, and I think once they were out the door, I heard my dad go up the stairs, and at that point, I had my phone on me, behind me, that I had hidden there that they didn't know about. So when I thought that they had heard them all leave, and my dad ran up the stairs, I whipped up the phone and I called 911. But I still hadn't heard anything from my mom, and all I could hear was my dad running on the street, just moaning and making sounds. And that's pretty much what I've...
So what happens? Continue on from now to the point that the police arrive.
I was just on the phone with the secretary or the operator. I begged her not to leave me alone, and that my dad was outside. I was yelling to him, but he wouldn't come in. I don't know if he didn't hear me, he didn't come in. I think he went to look for help. And I didn't get to see my dad at all until before I left the hospital just now.
How did you get free?
The cop came and he snipped the two strings off for me. I was asking them for so long, and and they said they couldn't untie me until they knew how to properly untie the string.
Okay.
So that's that, man. So, okay, without like stopping for too much on the first video, because we still have 2 other ones to play, albeit the other ones are a lot shorter than this first one. I just wanted to make this first interrogation video the longest one because it's pretty much like a few hours after, the whole incident goes down, and Jennifer is still like fresh regarding, the memory that she sort of gave to this investigator. Now, the first things I'm gonna mention is she mentioned one of the intruders as a gentleman. She said one of the gentlemen asked me to do this and that. I'm okay, man. So I'm thinking that's Like that's the red flag. If I'd be like, kudos to that investigator for keeping a straight face. The second thing I want to sort of mention is that she sort of has these bursts of like emotion, like at one point she's really emotional, then when she's like telling the details regarding the events that took place, she's like really serious, and at some point she's like really looking at the guy like for like confirmation that he's like still believes in her. So there, at first she's really emotional. In the middle section, she's like completely not emotional. She's like just saying the details, and then at the ending part, she's also emotional. I mean, without stepping here for too long, your thoughts on the first interrogation?
Yeah, I have the same reactions. There's a long video that's a compilation of the interrogations with good analysis called Jennifer's Story. It's one of the most popular YouTubes on this topic. So it's definitely worth taking a look. But yeah, I mean, what I think it's important to pay attention to in this clip you just showed, and then the two subsequent clips coming up, is watch her body language. Watch how her arms are. Watch how, especially in the future clips, her arms are going to creep up from by her waist to more like protecting herself and hiding and cringing. And I will say, even pay attention to the way she interacts with the police officers. It's almost like she reverted to how she would interact with her parents. And that makes me think that kind of the lying that she does here maybe mirrored some of the kind of lying and kind of like trying to tell somebody what they want to hear to protect yourself from them.
Yeah.
It's sort of the same behavior. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting interview. And I think the two clips you got coming up are really going to, especially as things start to fall apart, are really going to be demonstrative of what this person's mental state is.
Yeah, so the second clip actually took 2 days after the fact. So on the second clip, the interrogation already is suspecting her, and the main point was, well, basically, how the hell did she manage to make that phone call when she's like tied up to the upstairs banister? Like, and she actually, I'm thinking, like, in a burst of like brilliance, she actually comes up with a good explanation. So let's look at that whole situation.
Jennifer, I'm going to explain this sworn video statement form, and as we're now being recorded, this is not new to you. We've done this once before, okay? I want to before we get this, try and take that first interview that we had, which was, hours after what had transpired, put it aside. It's almost like we've never spoken before, okay? So we're starting afresh. We're starting from new. That way you're not going to say, I think I already told him that. Don't worry about what you've already told me. Any interaction, any communication going on between you and number one and number two while you're being bound?
My mother's calling for me.
Okay.
And they keep saying that to shut up.
Who's saying that to who?
Number 3 is downstairs and she's telling her to shut up.
She's telling her to shut up. What's your dad doing?
I can't hear my father.
Okay. You're now bound to the railing. Can you show me, can you stand up and turn around and tell me, just show on the camera, how your hands are bound? And how you are against the railing. You don't have to sit down. I just need to see how you were.
Just tell you.
The only reason that I need to do this is that I'm also going to ask you is that so take this back take it out of a traumatizing event, which it is, and put yourself into a more clinical position, because I want to see how you could physically get your phone out of your waistband. We're obviously going to need to know that. It's very important. So traumatize away. Now put yourself into just a state of, I need to mechanically show how I can get access to my phone. Okay, because that's obviously very relevant. We know you made the phone call, but questions are going to obviously raise is that if my hands are bound and I'm against the railing, how do I talk to a 911 operator? Okay, so clinically, this is now a clinical demonstration. Just stand up, focus in on how you did it. And I want you to stick that in your waistband as an example. Okay, so take your sweater off, because this will be a very smooth, very quick thing. It's a one-time demonstration. I'm not going to ask you to repeat it, but I need to go through it. Okay, so just take your sweater off. Stand up and turn around. Put this in the side that you believe it was in. Great. Turn around. So that you're looking away from me. You're looking exactly like, now here is where the banister is. Put your hands back behind your back, exactly how you remember they were. Okay? Now, are you restrained from movement? How far can you move your hands from the banister?
They tied my upper arm.
Yes?
Around the banister.
Yes?
But my hands were bound together.
So your hands bound together, and this is the arm that's the strings wrapped around against the banister? Mm-hmm. Okay, so now how can you get to the phone? And how do you make the phone call? 911?
Mm-hmm.
And do you talk down like that?
Yes, I'm yelling at the phone like this.
And how can you hear?
I turned the volume on max.
Yes? So that's exactly the way that you're talking to her against the railing. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good enough. Sit down. Put your sweater back on.
Right, so that was pretty much the second video, and the first thing I'm gonna say here is that those piano lessons, they definitely panned out for Jennifer Pan, because if she tried to get that phone out of her waistband and that phone slipped out of her fingers, that would look a lot worse on it. That would be a really gotcha type of a moment, because I feel like if I was reenacting that thing, I would definitely mess up. The phone would be really slipping out of my finger. So I'm thinking that she definitely was good in that sense. That's the only thing I've noticed here. And as well as I'm thinking, did she really not think this through when she was plotting? I don't know, man, without stepping here for too long, your thoughts?
I agree. I mean, she did it. A couple different commentators, both the person with the Jennifer Story video and Dr. Grande, said that she did a pretty good job improvising. But yeah, she didn't think this through, really. I think she didn't do a good job of rehearsing. And look, at this point, I think the detectives don't believe her at all. They're already seeing through the story. They're already seeing these telltale signs that you would have to be a real psychopath with kind of Casey Anthony level lying skills, which I'm going to compare this to Casey Anthony later, but I don't think Jennifer was nearly so good at the pathological lying. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny to me. I almost think, because look, at the end of the day, they got numbers against you, right? So you're one person, but meanwhile, those detectives, they work in multiple shifts. They do this all day. You're on their time. They're getting paid. You're not getting paid. They'll make you do this, tell this whole song and dance, and oh yeah, show me how you got the phone out of your hand while you were tied up. Oh yeah, and you see she's taking off her coat, she's sweating, her hands are creeping up towards her face and kind of clasped in front of her. And it's not, I don't think it's just a lot of it is not just based on how her emotions kind of fluctuate and how she's not very good at staying sad during these conversations. That was something that got pointed out a lot, was she's not a super good actress. So sometimes she does a really good job of seeing maybe she really is sad about what happened to her mom and dad in a way, but then it kind of falls apart, and it's effort. The detectives don't have to lie, but she does.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, man, so we have the third video that took place actually 2 weeks after she went to the whole event happened. Also, she went to the funeral, and one thing to mention here is that on her mother's funeral, she actually didn't show any emotions. So that was a really interesting part as well. So we have this third clip that we're gonna play, and this is when she cracks. We're gonna talk a little bit about how she cracked and give our final thoughts on this case after we show this last clip. Now I'm gonna play it right now.
about what happened at my home.
Okay. And that happened, there was a home invasion, for the record, there was a home invasion at your residence on the 8th of November 2010, is that correct? And your residence is located at 238 Helen Avenue in the town of Markham, that's correct? Okay. And as a result of that home invasion, your father, Hann Pan, was actually shot, and your mother, Bich Pan, was actually killed. Is that correct? Yeah, you'll have to speak up a little bit just so I can hear you.
Sorry, yes.
Okay. So that's what we're going to discuss here today. Sorry, aren't you? They were supposed to take you? Why? Okay. So they were supposed to take the whole family out?
No, just me.
What went wrong?
I don't know.
Okay. It was supposed to be you. Is that right? Okay. How was it supposed to happen then? What happened?
I don't know.
Why did it change?
I don't know.
Okay. What do you know? How come it was supposed to be you?
Because I didn't want to be here anymore.
Why not?
Because I was such a disappointment.
Okay, you made some mistakes, but nothing that couldn't be corrected.
Yep. So that was pretty much the last the last clip that we have, and pretty much in this clip, I will say that Bill Gates. Well, his name was not Bill. His name was William Gates, the guy who did the interrogation. I believe he was like the most senior interrogator, and he did like a really masterful job. I've looked through like a good amount of that third part of that third interrogation, and he like Bill Gates really knows what he's doing. And Jennifer just cracked, apparently telling Bill Gates that she like ordered the guys to come into the house and kill her. So like that's a really hard thing to buy here. I mean, your thoughts on the final interrogation?
I think this is where it was really worth some of the research on this. That other video I watched, like you said, that guy was really the closer of the crew of detectives. And it was interesting because they even pointed out how each one of those detectives staged the room differently. Like they took pains to show, you see, and I guess apparently there's hours and hours and hours of this footage available. And each one of these detectives had like a specific way, depending on how they wanted to make her feel, how they staged the room. So sometimes they wanted to make her feel safe. Sometimes they wanted to give her like security, like they put the table between him and them. Him and her.
Yeah.
And this last guy, it's worth looking, especially if you look at the other videos on this topic. He starts off and he makes it, and that desk is like way in the corner. There's no way that desk can be between him and her. And he keeps reeling it in. So like it actually, like as he gets more kind of hostile and accusatory and like starts shutting her down in the last interview, to the point, like you see in the first one, there's interviews, that desk is there, and she's all safe. And then the second one, it's like a little more ajar. And then the third one, that desk isn't even like barely there, if it's even there at all. And he, by the time she's confessing, like he has his head's a little weird that he is kind of like trying to comfort her. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a little bit. Yeah. I feel like here in the States, especially with all the Me Too stuff, like you don't want to be touching the suspect like that. But I guess he was working with it, but yeah, he's like up on her by the time he's like, yeah, you did it. Tell us what happened. And it's like kind of a combination, like he's playing bad cop, but he's also like, look, you had plenty of good reasons. One of the other detectives, I think the middle detective, does it too, where they're like, listen, like there was a lot going on, and your parents are pretty strict, weren't they? And it was hard to live like that, right?
I just want to add one thing. I believe there were only 2 interrogators. I believe the first and the second clip of the same guy. But yeah,
same dude.
But he did do like a different tactic. So
changes his strategy. Look in this video here. You can see like there's just that little tiny desk over there to the side, and it's what I mean. There's no protecting it, and you watch her arms, where she's just like she just wilts under this interrogation.
She cracked immediately.
Yeah.
I mean,
she gave it all up.
She probably didn't even have a lawyer, because like if I was her lawyer, I would told her don't say anything, like nothing, like, no interrogation, no nothing. And if you get any questions, you tell them no comment, like just nothing.
We'll see you in court. Yeah, exactly.
That's it. Like, what are you doing here, Jennifer? Why are you telling everyone about like you're self-incriminating? So, right, man, I'm thinking that this case, I mean, as you've mentioned in the beginning parts of our show tonight, that pretty much this wasn't a mystery episode for us, and I was actually a bit like worried about this show, because usually when there's a mystery at the end of the show, we sort of give our takes and our theories regarding whichever mystery we are covering and what we believe happened in a specific event. In this event, I'm thinking it's pretty clear what happened. The hit was definitely ordered. For the people that don't know about this case, you could definitely look into Jennifer's Solution by, I believe, JCS Crime Psychology, Criminal Psychology. It's an excellent YouTube channel. It's probably like my number 1 YouTube channel right now. So yeah, you could definitely check that guy out. I've learned a lot from him. Like just I've viewed like a handful of his like clips. I've learned a lot now. The last thing I want,
Casey Anthony, I was going to say this right after I was doing the research on this one.
Right.
It went into the Casey Anthony one again, and we did that episode. It's one of our favorite episodes. Is our Casey Anthony episode that we did is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And that one for research, I mean, we were just watching it again, and me and my kid, we were rolling with not ha-ha laughter, but like just making fun of just what a good and horrible narcissist of a liar Casey Anthony is in those videos. And he really, like what he shows, you're just like, oh my God, how did she get off with, so it's a great channel. I guess to your point, the real mystery here is kind of mysteries of the human mind, right? So it's like what makes someone do something like this, and to the original premise at the beginning of this, like what how much can you blame what happened on? You don't want to blame the victims, but you want to at least say that they had some role in this happening, or the development of their child. Is that true? Or is this a deviant person who would have done something like this regardless?
I mean, so to that end, my theory regarding this is that I think the parents definitely pushed her too hard, and I actually personally believe that I didn't see enough signs of like psychic behavior from Jennifer. I really think that she was the victim a little bit here as well of the type of parenting she was subjected to. Obviously, she could have chosen a million better ways to get out of that situation. I would probably offer a person who's stuck in a similar situation to just dodge the parents. If they're not with it, then screw them. I mean, you were self-sufficient. You had 2 jobs. You weren't lazy. You knew how to play the piano. You were really good at music. You were getting good grades at music. Just go do music. What your crazy, like tiger parents want to do, like, don't do that. That's their problems. They came from like war-torn country. They're psychologically damaged. Don't let their psychological damage affect you. So I'm thinking I really believe that if the parents were like normal, this would not have happened. That's my theory, that she was not born to become what she became, essentially. So that's where I'm gonna leave it, and I'll hand it over to you, man.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short, but I do have a little bit of a spiel about this, and then some of this is even in reaction to Dr. Grande's analysis, which I thought was good, but I differ with him a little bit on some points, and I'll give the reasons why. So yeah, just for real quick, to not repeat what I've said too much, I think that it was unrealistic of the parents to think that like that she could be a surgeon. I mean to be a surgeon, at least in North America, you have to have an IQ of somewhere between about, when you look at IQ studies matched with careers, you look in North America, at least you're looking at between 130 and 145 or something. So you're 2 to 3 standard deviations above the mean IQ. So that's really like trying to hit the lottery. I mean, you can't force your way into it. You can try for it for sure, but if you don't have the aptitude, just being a doctor, period, is already, you're looking at an IQ of 130 or so. So yeah, if your kid isn't that, it's not really fair to them. So I think it was unreasonable pressure. And then I think the other thing, like I mentioned, I think a lot of times it's not just tiger parents, it's lots of parents have a hard time making that transition from their child being a child that you can kind of tell what to do to being a teenager and then an adult. And it feels like they never made that transition. Like she was just really acquiescent, maybe because it always was their way or the highway. And then literally, look, she's in her 20s. Like you said, she's in her 20s. She's old enough to get married and have kids herself. Like, that's a perfectly reasonable age. And they're still like, hey, our way or the highway. And it's not even just like, hey, no more money. It's like you're out of the family. So from her perspective, I can't help but wonder, like Dr. Grande was kind of saying, well, she had low empathy and some of her actions were kind of psychopathic. But I feel like the family's action, well, the parents, not her brother, obviously, but her parents are kind of telling her value to them is kind of nothing, and kind of she's out of the family if she doesn't do what they say. So, I mean, I'm going to make a point after this that that doesn't mean you should go do what she did, but I could see how somebody who's not a mature person who hasn't actually grown up, coupled with some other things going on, might really feel like they have less choices, and then and in turn be like, oh, well, like you don't care about me, well now I don't care about you, and now that changes the equation for what I'm prepared to do to support myself, like your value to me. Maybe that's why she didn't cry at her mom's funeral, because it's almost like that scene in Natural Born Killers when Mallory turns on her mother after killing her father. Spoilers. Sorry, the movie's like 30 years old. But yeah, I mean, there's a part in the movie where the dad is the awful one, the Rodney Dangerfield character, but then she's like, and you never did anything. Well, he did all that stuff. You knew. So I almost wonder if for all the bad stuff that her dad did, she felt like her mom should have done more. So, okay, that's my thought about her. I do think that she wasn't a very developed person. I think she was, like we said, super over optimistic that she could withstand, the scrutiny of trained police detectives. I just don't think she thought it out very well. I think she's probably not let's face it, people aren't really supposed to be doing things like this. And I can't help but wonder how much the media, so all the movies and things like that we watch, how much that puts things in people's heads. Like, how much did this happen in the 1500s? Like, before this was a something that we saw movies and TV shows about all the time.
Yeah.
For sure, people did plot deaths. I mean, they think actually a lot of murders in the past went undiscovered because people that cooked were very good at doing poisonings and not getting detected. So
okay.
Yeah, that's kind of a crazy part, is that there may be a lot more homicides that were written off as food poisoning and stuff like that, because people could get pretty good about doing poisonings. But that being said, yeah, I mean, I can't help but think that she was kind of a damaged person, like you said. In another situation, she doesn't do this. Dr. Grande. Here's before I get to the final point, one of the things that I want to say that's maybe particular to where she grew up and the part of North America she's in is that, Dr. Grande kind of said oh, well, she was pretty fixated on this relationship and the romantic attraction and attachment to the boyfriend. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. I mean, it sounds like it was her only boyfriend. So right from that, you're going to be super attached to that person because you don't have anything else to compare it to. You haven't been through heartbreak. But I will also say that I think I say this because I've known some people from kind of the same ethnic background. Or one thing that's interesting about the East Coast of North America, and I'd say even specifically like Toronto and Ontario, places like that, is that I've known a couple different women. I'm going to get into a little bit of social justice stuff right now, but I've known a couple different women of color, so who are not ethnically Caucasian, who grew up there. And it's interesting because, like, I'm kind of coming from a bubble here in California, where in California there's a lot of interracial dating. Like, all of my girlfriends were always not my race, let's say, and that is all actually like it's not super abnormal. You know what I mean? So someone like Jennifer here in Los Angeles or San Francisco or San Jose, or like on the West Coast, would have plenty of dating opportunities. But I'm sad to say that from who I've talked to a lot of people who, like I said, are not Caucasian from back east and from up north, like in the place where she grew up, and that was not the case. It was kind of staggering. You'd have people come here, and they were just like beautiful women that were intelligent and had a lot to offer. And between their own culture saying, kind of like her parents saying, no, I want you to date within our ethnic group, and it's like, well, there's only 10,000 of us in this whole area, so that's not a lot of people to choose from, in my age group, and then sort of not being valued because of racist reasons. I'll just say it, from like kind of the native born population there that maybe is predominantly one group. I could see someone like that saying, hey, this dude, this pot dealer guy, like maybe this is as good as it's going to get. Like maybe I don't, being really worried between our parents, threatening to disown her, being really like clingy. So that's where I don't know that Dr. Grande had that kind of insight, and that's where I take a little bit of pains. Either way, I'd like to conclude this by saying, look, at the end of the day, you're right, Juras, that like what she did, like let's say worst case scenario, you get disowned, you get kicked out of your family, things change over time, but people don't come back to life. So like it's very easy to make a foolish decision, and sometimes I think especially a lot of young people unfortunately don't have the time to like understand that, and it does feel like if all you have for your frame of reference is whatever already happened, it's a really limited scope of vision. I think that it's really sad because, like, yeah, to your point, like the worst could have happened, that she got disowned and kicked out of the house and had some bad times for a while. She still could have had a really good life. So could have all these people that, like you said, split $10,000 three ways and, sold their future for, they're in jail for the rest of their lives. That's a pretty stupid decision. All these people are pretty young. Yeah, I would say to anybody that's listening, I'm sure there's at least one person that listens to us that might hear this, that might be deciding to do something stupid. Maybe not something like this, but something else where it's like, look, I want you to really think about it and think about how all things change over time. Over time, everything kind of works itself out for good and for bad. Just think about what you can't undo when you make a decision. There's plenty of good things you can do with your time, plenty of good choices you can make, but there's a handful of really bad choices that you can never take back. And that's, I think, maybe one of the key aspects of this case is, all the bad stuff that happened to you doesn't justify the ends of what could happen to you if you do something, drastic. So
yeah,
that's my thought.
That was really cool, man. That whole like spiel that you just gave, I think you should like run for president or something like that. Yeah, man, so this was actually a really interesting case. I was actually thinking that we will have a hard time because there's no actual mystery here. Well, there was this psychological mystery that we sort of, I think, answered to our audience. And I guess, guys, as always, we really appreciate your comments. So leave a comment in our YouTube channel, contact us on our Gmail if you want. All of the information is in our bios on our various social media channels. If you have a case that you want us to do next, just leave that in the comments. We always take suggestions. And as always, guys, thank you for listening, and I really hope that you will catch us on our next week's episode. And for now, stay safe and peace out.